Let's talk about per capita. Now, per capita really means per person. So when you see a problem that says per capita, that means we are writing whatever the item is. Per implies a fraction sign, and then we have people on the bottom. So that's exactly what we want to think about this. When we think about per capita, think about a fraction. Per is the fraction bar. You're going to put the amount of people on the bottom, whatever the topic is on the top, and then you are going to divide. So topic divided by the people, and you're going to get yourself a number, and that represents per one person. That is the idea, per one person. So let's do some of these. Consider the ratio of total hospital revenue to the U.S. population. The American Hospital Directory reported that a total of $4.1 trillion in hospital revenue for 2019. If the U.S. population was approximately 335 million in 2019, the ratio of hospital revenue to people, or hospital revenue per capita, would be what? Okay, so we're talking about hospital revenue per person, right? So I oftentimes like to put this in words first. Okay, so hospital revenue goes on the top. 4.1 trillion over the population of 335 million. Now let's think through these numbers here. Okay, so I have trillion. So 4.1 times 10 to the 12th. Well, I also like to think I'm just going to keep 335 times 10 to the 6th. Now I can divide and play with scientific notation. So when I divide, I start with my numbers. I'm going to take 4.1 divided by 335. That gives me 0.012238806. I just took all the decimal places in my calculator. Then 10 to the 12th divided by 10 to the 6th. Well, same base, we subtract the exponent. So 12 minus 6 is 6. Now, when we talk about per capita, we don't talk about scientific notation. So I need to change this to standard form. My exponent here is positive, so that means I'm going to move my number to the right to make my number bigger. And I'm going to move it 6 places. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I have 12,238.806. Now, we are talking about money, right? Because hospital revenue is in dollars. So that means I want to round to the nearest cent. 1 tells me to round down. And I'm going to end up with 12,238.80. Now, depending on how you round, you might get a slightly different answer, but this is what I have here, okay? I mean, rounding in terms of like to the nearest cent kind of a thing. So $12,238.80 per person. That's the hospital revenue. Over $12,000 per every person in the U.S. Great. According to the same report, Indiana's hospital revenue was $86.8 billion. If the population of Indiana was approximately 6.8 million, find the hospital revenue per capita in Indiana and write it in a meaningful sentence. So again, we're talking about hospital revenue over people. So revenue, 86.8 billion. Billion means 9. 6.8 million. Million means 6. Great. Let's divide. 86.8 divided by 6.8 gives me 12.7647058. 10 to the 9th divided by 10 to the 6th is 10 to the 3rd. Once again, I'm going to move this 3 places to the right. 1, 2, 3. So I get 12,764.70588. Well, we're rounding to the nearest cent, so I'm looking at the 5. 5 tells me to round up. So 12,764.71. Now, writing that in a meaningful sentence, for every person in Indiana, there is $12,764.71 in hospital revenue. Now, folks, when I say every person, that's every child, every old person, literally every person. There's this much revenue from hospitals. Okay, great. Let's move on. In 2018, the Small Arms Survey released a report that stated the U.S. had the highest civilian-held firearms per capita of any nation in the world. The report estimated there were 393.3 million civilian-held legal and illicit firearms in the U.S. at a time that the population was approximately 325.1 million people. Calculate the number of firearms per capita in the U.S. Okay, firearms per capita. That means firearms go on the top. Per is the fraction bar. Capita means people. So how many firearms did we have? 393.3 million. Million means times 10 to the 6th. How many people did we have? 325.1 million. Million is also times 10 to the 6th. Now you'll notice here, times 10 to the 6th times 10 to the 6th, those cancel out, right? Anything over itself is just 1. So I really just have 393.3 divided by 325.1, which gives me a 1.2097-ish. So if we round to the nearest hundredth, we could say there's 1.21 firearms per person in the United States. So again, every person in the U.S. has a little bit more than one firearm based off of this. Now I can tell you there are 4 people in my house and we do not own a firearm. So somebody is going to have more than one because we have none. Okay. Anyway, let's go to number 3. The same report referenced in number 2 stated that there were 857 million firearms in civilian hands worldwide. If the global population at that time was estimated to be 7.6 billion people, find the number of civilian firearms per capita. Okay, so again, firearms, per is the fraction bar, capita means people or persons. So how many firearms do we have? 857 million means 6. And people, 7.6 billion means 9. So we divide. 857 divided by 7.6 gives me 112.763159. 10 to the 6th divided by 10 to the 9th is 10 to the negative 3rd because 6 minus 9 is negative 3. Now, because this exponent is negative 3, we need to get our number to get smaller. So we're going to move it 3 places. 1, 2, 3. So I have 0.112763159. So if I round this, let's go to the nearest hundred or thousandth. This we'll go to 7 here. So we have 0.113 firearms per person. This is over the world. Worldwide. So now thinking about this, in the U.S. by itself, we had 1.21 firearms per person. In the world, we had 0.113 firearms per person. So think about the comparisons. What can we conclude? Well, the U.S. has way more firearms per person. Right? And we're not talking about total firearms because you can't compare total numbers when you think about populations of nations, right? The U.S. has 325 million people. There are some nations that have like 800,000. So it's not fair to compare numbers. But when we compare per person, that's what breaks it down because we can do a comparison 1-to-1. One person here, one person there. What's the comparison? And when you think about the average worldwide being about 1 out of every 10 person has a firearm, that's what that means. Whereas in the U.S., everybody has more than one, right? This would be like 1.2 over 1 or 12 over 10. That's very, very different when you think about the number of firearms, right? In the U.S., we just have way more per person and way more overall. So we have like more than 10 times the world average when it comes to firearms per capita. That's just a lot.